I took 6 courses per semester while pursuing a dual degree and wanted to complete it all in 4 years. I was up to my neck in ears for several semesters in schoolwork and studying. My university's library stayed open till midnight. I was also interning that semester, so I had no time to do my assignments. At this point, I was still living on campus, and my suitmates could sometimes be loud and irritating. Because it was a Wednesday night, I had 3 classes and an internship that day. I also had 2 tests the next day, so I headed directly to the library after finishing my training. Our campus library was enormous. When I arrived at 9 p.m., there were still many people everywhere. Still, from 9 to 10, it quieted significantly, and I planned to stay until midnight to study for my 2 examinations the next day. Around 11 a.m., most people had left, but some remained. I was seated at one of the tables that was wedged between 2 bookshelves on either side, so it was a little more private and secluded, with fewer interruptions, where I was sitting. By 11 a.m., a man in his mid-20s entered the section, walked past one of the many unoccupied tables, and came to mine, where he sat diagonally across from me. When I looked up, he returned my gaze and grinned as he laid his books down. I replaced my eyes with my studies, trying not to think about why he had chosen to sit at my table. I was browsing through the slides on my laptop to study when the guy at my table remarked, "Excuse me," and then inquired whether I was taking a specific economics course. I politely told him, "No, sorry," and hoped that was the end. But then he explained why he asked that, stating that his professor is an expletive who gives pop quizzes daily. Wow, it truly stinks, I thought before returning to my studies. My mind was no longer entirely immersed in the material. Now, I was distracted by the presence of this man who I suspected would keep trying to talk to me. I looked up from my laptop screen to see that man beaming with his lips at me. I returned my gaze to my laptop, considering getting up and moving elsewhere, or simply leaving. He then inquired as to my name. I made up a name and called myself Chelsea. "You have lovely blue eyes, Chelsea," he added. This was when I began to worry if this man was truly here to study or snoop on women, and the fact that he appeared nearly 30 didn't help. I inquired as to the name of his economics professor. He paused for a moment before saying, "Professor Davis." I asked as to whether he was familiar with the first name. "No," he said, shaking his head. I immediately proceeded to ratemyprofessor.com and searched for any teachers with the surname Davis at our institution. Only one appeared, a maths professor whose last reviews were left years ago. I decided to get up and beg for assistance from the security guard at the front door. As I stood up, I felt the man at the table staring at me, so I went over to the security guard and told him that this man was freaking me out and that I didn't think he was a student. The security guard approached me again and wanted to see the man's student ID. He began searching through his wallet, then his pockets, before concluding that he must have left it in his dorm. The security guard then inquired as to which dorm building he was in. He lied since he couldn't think of anything to say and eventually just stated, "I honestly don't recall what it's called." The security guard escorted him out of the library, and he returned to tell me to be cautious as I walked back to my room. I expressed my gratitude to him. The rest of my time at the library was spent distractedly thinking about what a weirdo that guy was. I tried my hardest to continue studying, but at about noon, I realized it was time to call it quits so I could get some sleep. I collected my belongings and exited as the security guard did. He wasn't standing there then. I'm still determining where he went. I began wandering through the mostly deserted campus. On a Monday through Wednesday night, no one walks around that late. That's why, as I approached my dorm building and heard at least one loud sound of a shoe hitting the concrete behind me, I whirled around and saw no one. But I was sure I heard a footstep. I began to run, which may have been a mistake because the second I started running, which was made more difficult by my bag, I heard footsteps behind me. When I turned around, a man from the library was rushing at me. I yelled at the top of my lungs for a split second before being tackled to the ground and placing a hand over my lips. He threatened me repeatedly, saying, "You best shut up, or I'll murder you." I truly believed that my life was about to end. I was still attempting to yell for aid, but it was muffled by his hand. He then rose to his feet and began dragging me by the throat away from the main walkways, and I noticed he was hauling me toward the woods near the dorms. I managed to pry his hand away from my mouth long enough to scream again. It was enough to draw the attention of these two guys who came sprinting over, yelling at my kidnapper. "Hey, stop." The man let grip of me and began running away towards the bushes. The two guys approached me, and I'm sure they asked if I was okay and such, but I filtered out all the noise for a few moments, since I was in complete disbelief. I let all of my feelings out and began weeping my eyes out. The two males dialed the university police, and I tried to remain calm and explain. We went to the library and asked the security guard for his description of the man, which matched mine. The authorities also got a clear picture of the man's face by using footage from the library cameras. The photo was distributed to all students' phones, emails, and the school website. And that same night, an anonymous tip indicated that the man was in a late-night dive bar down the street from the school. When the cops came to the pub, they arrested him. The amount of trauma this caused me was immense. I can't imagine the anguish of people less fortunate than me in situations like these. In my early 20s, I worked at the local public library. After my first employment, I worked the night shifts at least 3 times a week as my second job. I'd arrive at 6 o'clock in the morning and work until 9 o'clock in the evening. I would also be the one to lock up the facility once it closed, but I would wait to leave immediately after the library closed. I'd have to switch off all the computers, clean and organize, restock the shelves with all the day's returned books and DVDs, take out the garbage, and only then could I leave. It was a Friday night at the end of the night. Most of the other library personnel had already left, leaving only myself and one of the female librarians. I had made a couple of final call announcements to the library's remaining patrons, informing them that the library would be shutting soon. I started cleaning up, hoping to finish early so I could leave and enjoy my weekend. When the clock struck 9 o'clock, the only other employee left said goodbye to me. I announced the library's closure over the intercom. The 2 remaining guests stood up from their tables and began packing their belongings before exiting via the door. I locked the front door when no one else was in the building. I then began rearranging all the chairs so they could be neatly tucked under their tables. Then I began emptying all the garbage cans, and when it came time to take them outside to the dumpster on the side, I unlocked the front door again and brought them out. It was peaceful because the library was situated away from any major roadways. When I returned inside, I shut the door once more. All I had to do now was refill the day's returned books and DVDs. I took the 2 boxes and began with the DVDs, which was more straightforward because the DVD portion was more minor. It took between 5 and 10 minutes. I heard something coming from one of the book aisles during this time. I wandered down the aisles until I went to an open book on the floor that had fallen off the shelf. I replaced it and stood there momentarily, puzzled about how that could have happened. I returned to work, and after finishing the DVDs, I got the box of books and began rearranging them on the shelves alphabetically. I started with the A's. To make things easier, the books in the box were arranged alphabetically. I heard another disturbance nearby as I worked my way down the shelves, hoping to pound this out and get home. It wasn't a coincidence that I saw him twice in less than 20 minutes. I laid the package down and resumed my trip through the book aisles. On another aisle, I discovered 2 more books on the ground. Someone was present. "Excuse me, the library is closed," I said, as I walked out to the open area with all the tables and things. There was silence until I heard something from the children's section across the library. As I approached the noises, they began to sound like a mad animal making growling sounds. I also heard books being tossed on the ground. It was coming from one of the aisles. As I worked up the nerve to take a look down the aisle, I noticed a woman in a nightgown throwing random books off the shelf while making these terrible animal-like noises. I remained silent. I spun around and dashed to the office where we had the phone. At the time, I didn't have a cell phone. I secured the office door and closed the window curtains before dialing 911. I reported that there was a sickly woman in the library and that I believed an ambulance should be dispatched. They inquired if I had approached the woman, and I responded no because she appeared dangerous. When the operator asked if the woman was still in the same position, I shouted and opened the blinds because she was staring in on the opposite side of the glass. Her pupils were so dilated that she appeared demonic. "She's right outside the office," I told the operator. The woman began banging on the glass and screamed gibberish. When she couldn't open the door, she turned around and sat in a chair facing the office. The operator instructed me to keep the blind open and keep an eye on her. I noticed the woman was shaky as she sat down, so I knew she was high out of her mind. The library was visited by 2 police cars and 1 ambulance. The woman was handcuffed after attempting to resist the police officers, but nothing she said made sense. She was loaded into the back of an ambulance and driven away. I never found out what she was up to. I'm unsure how she got in. Maybe while I was taking out the garbage, or perhaps she was inside before I even locked the door. In any case, being alone in the library after it had closed was unnerving from then on. When I was 7, my family relocated to a new town. Any recollections I have before that move are from my early childhood, and many could be more apparent. One of those recollections is this. I know this happened before the age of 7. If I had to guess, I was 5 or 6. My mother always took my brothers and me to the local town library. It was only a couple of blocks away. One day, I remembered this. It was just my mother and my toddler brother at the time. We started the day at the mall and undoubtedly spent hours shopping with our mother. She'd always take us to the McDonald's within the mall for ice cream cones whenever we went to this mall. I remember getting ice cream on this specific day because I still had some of the cones in my hand when I walked to the library after leaving the mall. When we got to the library, there was a kids' computer section where my mother would let me stay and play computer games while she did her business. I got up when I became tired of playing whatever ancient internet computer games were available. I began searching the aisles of books in the library's children's section, looking for the I Spy books. The children's area was located in the far corner of the library. Peek-a-boo, I heard from behind me as I walked from aisle to aisle. When I turned around, I saw nothing. I was glancing at the library's back wall, which had another shelf of books resting against it. Then I noticed half of a grown man's face peering around the frame and said, "Peek-a-boo." I recall laughing and not feeling threatened. He did it again. He got behind the shelf, poked out his head, and said, "Peek-a-boo." I left. He inquired what I was looking for, and I told him I was looking for the I Spy novels. He promised to assist me in locating it. He approached, took my hand, and guided me around the aisles, eventually leading us to the section of books starting with the letter I. There were at least 5 I Spy novels right next to each other. "Let's go sit down and play," he suggested as I grabbed my favorite, the treasure hunt one. He brought me to a table near a couple of children's PCs in the corner, where we began browsing through the photos. This continued for a while, and he asked me personal things as we played. I Spy. "Who are you here with?" is a question that has stayed with me the most. "My parents and small brother," I explained. After that, he said something hinting that there was a kid's playroom downstairs, and I had no idea there was a downstairs to the library when I was that age. "We could take the book down there," he replied. He led me to the entrance to the library's basement, where events and meetings for various groups and organizations are held. There's a small playroom for parents who must bring their children to any sessions. The dude took me to that small playroom. Other toys were in there, including a Lego set and a Lego table. Then, there were several chairs. He placed the I Spy book on the Lego table. Thinking back on it, this is where things get incredibly awkward. I began to feel uneasy as he tried to get me to play with the toys. And at this time, a female librarian said into the intercom through the loudspeaker, "Please, Liam, come to the front. Your mother is on the lookout for you." The man went to turn out the lights in the room at this point, and it was pitching black inside. "We're going to play hide and seek," he whispered in the gloom. This was the first time I was genuinely terrified, and I began to yell for my mother. He kept urging me to remain quiet, and his voice became louder as he got closer to me in the dark until he had his hands on me. Fortunately, I could run past him and out the door of that room, then along the dark corridor back to the stairs. I had that childish feeling of fleeing up the basement stairs after shutting off the lights, only 100 times worse because I was afraid of being snatched. I returned to the library's main floor and raced directly to the front desk, calling for my mother. She was at the front desk with many librarians, and I remember my mother's relief when she spotted me. When I informed her there was a man who led me downstairs, she nearly died. The next thing I remember seeing was a swarm of police officers searching the building, but I never saw that man again. He must have left the building on a different route. I recall conversing with a woman, probably with the police, and asking me sensitive questions. I never asked my mother about this incident because it's pretty uncomfortable, and I'd instead not think about it.